For the video for Lab 2, today we're going to go over starting to make a sun study for our site, which involves changing the materials of these masses and also adding building pads. Then we're also going to look at importing in CAD and starting to make your project where it needs to be. So just to get started, what we need to do with the sun study is we're going to want to cast shadows and see how they pass over the site. So before we do that, just to simplify what we're looking at, click on the CAD link below, and then you can right click and say hide in view and do those elements, just to keep this much simpler than it was. So now let's assign materials, and these masses will do weird things when we try and assign materials. So I'm going to click on this mass. I'll note that it's 91 feet up because it likes to move these things sometimes when you edit them. So it's 91 feet up, and what I'm going to have to do is click Edit Mass, and you can see it moved it below the ground here. So I'll just select everything and grab it, and we're going to change its material, kind of just like what we did with the topography. It's the same settings. We're going to go in here, click the little ellipsis in the gray box, and we're going to make a new material, create a new material. And then you can right click on that, rename it, and we're called existing buildings. And in here, I'm not going to bring in the asset manager because I don't need this to have some kind of image map or anything on it. I'm just going to check its appearance, and its appearance is just this gray color. And you can change that appearance. You can make it white. You can do whatever you want to do. I'll leave it that gray color for now. But these are all the settings that you can change for what it looks like when you render. And then in shaded view, we can also say use render appearance so it has the same gray color that is set in the render appearance. So with that, hit OK. It's now since we selected it all before we changed the material, that's now changed its material. Hit finish. The mass stays down there for some reason. So you click on it and I say go back up 91 feet. And I'm going to do the same thing to this one. So with that, it's not even, but it's about 101 feet. So I'm going to edit in place. I'll select it. We don't need to make the material anymore. I could just click on it and hit OK. And that one actually didn't move down. So that mass was happy staying where it was. So now with these masses and their material assigned, we're going to start looking at making our sun study. So to do that, we're going to come down here to our little our view controls, and there's this orb with a shadow and a red X. You click on it, and the red X goes away, and it's casting a shadow. You can see that strangely our entire site casts as a shadow down on our datum plane, but it also casts a shadow on the terrain. So what we're going to do now is we're going to control how the sun moves around the site. But before I do that, I'm going to actually duplicate this 3D view. This is our default 3D view that we've been modeling in. So I can right click on it, just say duplicate view. And I did that fast, but I said duplicate, just plain duplicate, not duplicate with detailing. And then once I've done that, I'm going to rename, and let's name this one the winter solstice, because that's what we're going to set this view up as. And so now we're casting shadows. I don't know how it's deciding to cast shadows until I come and check what the sun is, what the sun's doing. So if I click on the sun down here, you could turn the sun path on if you want to see it. Yeah, see, it's just making up sunlight. So that's what that warning is. So it's not actually showing us where the sun is. But if I come here to sun settings, right now it's just coming from a specific angle relative to view. But what we want to actually do is we want to do a sun study for one day of the year. So I'll say single day, and I'll do the presets for winter solstice solar study. Doesn't really matter the year, but we can make it current. And we do sunrise to sunset. I will do every 15 minutes, and I'm going to set it to my ground floor instead of datum. And OK. Everything gets dark because what it's doing is it's right at sunrise on the summer solstice. But what we're going to do is we're going to make the sun move so we can see what it looks like. So if you click down here, now that you've set all this up, suddenly this button appears for Preview Solar Study. Click on that, and it seems like nothing happens, and you might get frustrated, but this little option bar showed up again. We'll see this show its face a few times, and it's always very hard to notice when it actually turns on. But now that it's on, click play, and it'll take you through the day in 15-minute increments and what the sun will look like. So that's really it. We've made our solar study. We have an animation, and it's all set up in this view. And if you want to export these animations, you can come in, export. We're going to do images and animations. It says it already knows that solar study is an option. And here you'll just pick up how many frames per second and what size you want the image to be. And then you can also include the date and time stamp, which is sometimes nice to see if it's 9 a.m., 10 a.m., and how time passes. So right now, frames per second, we're going to reduce the frames per second here so that our total animation is longer than 2 seconds. Because there's only 38 increments of 15 minutes during daylight, that's what's deciding it at 15 frames per second. So we're going to make this something more like 3. And then you have to click somewhere else. And that makes it a 12-minute animation that makes more sense. So hit OK. And then you could save it as your favorite type of AVI file. So I'll cancel that. And what we're going to do now is we're going to make the other two steps that we want to have with these solar studies. So we're going to just duplicate this, right click on it, duplicate view, just plain old duplicate, and we will do the summer solstice. And the main change we need to do with that is just changing the sun settings. So come down here to the sun settings. We're going to do the summer solstice. And we're going to make sure everything's the same. So this should be 2020, sunrise to sunset every 15 minutes. And ground plane level is at ground. Okay. You can see the sun path has changed a lot. You can preview it the same way we did before. And just watch how the sun passes over. And obviously, this is all based on the fact that in the first lab, we set true north properly and we set the right location. If you have not done that yet in this model, this will all be nonsense and won't help you at all with your design. So let's duplicate this next one. We're going to do one of the equinoxes. Let's do spring. And same thing, sun settings. We're going to use the presets that we already have for single day. Make it 2020, sunrise to sunset, every 15 minutes, and ground. So if you were ever trying to figure out a specific time of day, you could always change it to still, and you could pick the exact time of day that you want to do it. But here, we're staying single day. We're doing the spring equinox, and then have all these settings set up correctly. Hit OK. And same thing. you can give it a preview. And all three of these can be exported as animations. You can export, if you wanted to export still images out at different times of day, you could do that. You could do for an equinox and the solstices, you could do 10 a.m., noon, 4 p.m., 3 p.m., something like that, and just render the images, save them, and export them out. Use them for your presentation. So that's the bulk of what we wanted to go over with these sun studies. These pre-made sun studies will remain here while you're designing, so you can always come back and check and see how the sun passes over and interacts with your building facade. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go more into starting to really make your building. So let's make sure we're under floor plans. Let's go to your ground floor plan, which we have cropped down to just be mostly just the active site. We can actually crop this down a little bit more once we want to print it out. So what we're going to do is most people have CAD files that they want to use and bring in. So if you want to import in a Rhino file, you can do that. Follow the other video that I added to this assignment. It's bringing in Rhino files. It's basically going to just take your Rhino file, you're going to put it into conceptual mass and throw it in here. And the advantage, you could do that, you could bring in Rhino files natively, but if you find that you can't click on any of their surfaces to apply walls, that's when you should follow the video, which tells you how to make it into a mass. And then you can apply walls to the existing walls you've already made in Rhino. It might save you a few steps. But you could certainly bring in a Rhino file too and place it here and trace it. I'm going to just put in a CAD file. And right now I'm just going to put it in on my ground floor layer. So when we're on the ground floor plan, typically, I'm just going to show you the architecture tab. You can always check your work set. And the work set on plans, unless you change it, is going to be the plan you're on, which is good because that's what's going to put the CAD layer on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Insert, and I'm going to link this CAD because we might be updating these CAD files as you work on your program. All right, so I've found the file. Mine's really, don't copy my design. It's not going to be that great. Mine is just a very simple CAD file with some shapes in it so you can see what happens. If you want it to only show up in the current view, just be careful clicking this because sometimes it causes trouble. You can, and the CAD file will only be visible in this view. But right now, I'm just bringing it in the trace. I might want to see it in 3D too, so I don't want to click that line. I'll hit Open. Places it down here. When I click on it, I can't move it because it's pinned. See this little thumbtack sticking out of it? That's good if you want to make sure things don't get moved on you. But you can, if you click on the thumbtack, it unpins it. You could also click on the shape and come up here to unpin or type the word up. So that unpins it. Now I can kind of drag this more into place with where I wanted the building to be. Okay, so what can you do now that you have this in? I'm going to look at it in 3D just so we can see it. So you see it's sitting at that, wherever we set the ground level. And you can select it in 3D. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start massing up my building. If you have a more developed floor plan, you can actually start making the walls. You might not want to start at the mass, but I'm going to start it at the mass just to show you some additional tools. So I have this made, and in my 3D view, come in here, I'm going to make sure when I'm drawing in 3D that I go to my architecture tab and set my work plane to not be datum. I want it to be ground in here. And now I'm going to come in and I'm going to start doing what we did before, massing in site, in place mass. And I can actually just trace these pieces. So I can use my I'm not going to place it on datum. I'm going to place it on ground. I can use my pick command. Select all of that. I'm just going to create these as separate shapes. Create a form. Do the same thing. Select all of the shape. Create a form. And then I'm going to also select this one. It's asking me how I want to rotate it. I want to extrude it. I don't want to rotate it and make a sphere. So I'm going to just extrude it. Then I can come in using my tab, select like the top, just the top surface, make it taller, and start massing up my building. And I can always use the join command to join these together. So now, even though this shape is overlapping this one, it cuts it, so it's one shape. So why would I make it a mass? What it lets me do is it lets me possibly create some design options very quickly. So if I wasn't necessarily set on this mass, and we're going to use design options for more times during this semester, you can actually take elements in the model. In this case, I'm taking all the new stuff that I'm designing for the site, and we can make design options. So I'm going to go to Manage and Design Options, and then it gives me this menu. I'm going to create a new option set, and we can rename that to be, building mass. There's only one option in it. I can make a couple more, but what I'll then do is just close that. And if I take this mass, I can go back to Manage and say Add to Set. And I can add it to all three design options. They're all checked. It's all under building mass because we only have one option. Hit OK. What does that do? It means I can't select the model anymore. So you can see I'm selecting everything that's not this piece. And the reason for that is it'll only let you edit it if you're editing that design option. So if I come down here to main model and I switch to option 1, I can now only edit my mass. So let's say I thought that this was a reasonable scheme. What I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to option 2 because I wanted to explore making this taller. I think that these pieces should have probably been a little bit smaller and come out closer to the street. And then I can also go to option 3, and that one I wanted this to be taller, this to be shorter. And I wanted this to kind of also intersect with my circle. And what that lets you do is it lets you toggle between all your design options in whatever view you're in. You can toggle between them. And so this is a powerful tool because it only takes the objects that you want it to take. So even if you're further along, if you've built up your building and it's all built out of building elements, walls, floors, everything, we can still grab all of one facade and put it in 3 different design options and play around with how those design options look. And then once you're done, you can accept the one that you like the best. So in this case, I'm going to say, let's say I'm just going to like design option 1. I don't have to keep these design options around forever. I can say design option 1 is the primary one. I click finish editing. So that's the one I always show in default. So I'm going to just say I like option 1. I'm going to accept the primary. And it's going to delete all the other work I've put into these other options. And what it does is it brings us back, and now it's part of the main model again. So that's a powerful tool. What I'm also going to do now that I'm setting a building on the site is I'm going to make a building pad to see how my building interacts with the site. And just think of a building pad as it almost looks like a floor, but its main job really is cutting the site or raising the site to the bottom of your building. This will help us figure out how ground floor level should really exist. And what you're also going to find is if you're doing a basement, you'll make your building pad much lower you'll make a basement level and then you'll build your building pad off of that level. So in here, I'm going to go to my ground floor level and I'm going to make a building pad. So I'll go to massing and site and there's building pad. And I'm going to have it exist just on the outer edge of my building. So you can see here, it made that line go all the way across. I'm going to use the trim command. Trim that off. Nope, they can't be joined. Keep marching around. And this is overlapping. But I'm going to use the trim command again. Trim that off. Trim that off. So we should just be one line crossing the outside of the building. And you might find that sometimes once you figure out your wall thicknesses, you'll come back and edit this and move it in behind the walls so that the ground hits the outer walls, but you don't see the building pad sticking out. So I will go to a 3D view so you can see what this does. And when I hit the green check, what it will do is it'll bring up any site that is below it. So you can see this is actually the building pad. This is the site work that it's raising off the ground and getting it to my main level. But over here, we're almost flush. It would cut a hole in the ground if we were any lower. So what you might find is that if we need to change our height, I'll go to one of our elevations just to mess with that. So here's our ground floor. Maybe instead of 98, I wanted to try this out at 96. So now if I'm in a 3D view, we're cutting into the ground. So a lot of this will depend on how, where you're thinking of doing your entry. And again, this is all parametric, so you can go up and down, bring the whole building up and down as needed. The other thing we can do is we can add in other floors right now. So to do that, I kind of want to create a real proper elevation, proper south elevation. So if we come back to our ground floor plan, right now we have these little guys hanging out here. These are elevation markers that existed before we really even started the project. They came with a template. So what you can do is you can either move these. So let's do the north one. I'm going to move it to the north side of my building. And then I'm going to click on the little point of it to see where my cut line is. This is my cut line. So that's good. We can do the same with these ones. Move them. Okay, that's good. And move them. Check where I'm cutting. My last one, my south one, is hidden, so I'm going to extend this down until I can find it. It should be down here somewhere. There it is. Selecting that, moving it. All right, and check out. So these elevations are not going to be quite right starting off because they're going to be way down on the datum level. So if I go to my south elevation, we can see that it's getting a lot more information than it truly needs. Turn on shaded render. Okay. And also, it's not really our south elevation. Looks like it's our east elevation. So we'll want to rename these by the way the project is oriented. But what we also want to do is just, let's simplify these down to what we want to see in these elevations. So again, we're going to use that, turn on our crop, make the crop line visible, and we're going to crop this down. You might not even want all of this context. But here's the little concept thing I put in there. Here's our adjacent buildings. You might even want to you could create two elevations. You could have one with more context and one that's just your building elevations. But now that I have this made, I'm going to type VG, and I'm going to turn off that campus plan that's showing up and everything, that site plan. So now we're a little simpler. You can see our ground floor plan is right here. I'm going to drag our ground plan over here. Drag this end. So it's passing through our building. All right, and then we're going to rename this one from south to, I'm going to do all capitals, east elevation. All right, and run through, and we could set all of these up. I'm going to type SD, turn on the shaded render again. So this looks like our north elevation. So turn on all of this, the crop region, crop it down to just be our building. And then again, we could type VG or go to View, Visibility Graphics, and we're going to hide those imported categories of the site. Clean that up. And here's our ground plan. Again, I would want to drag this through the building so that we know our ground floor. I didn't get that. Click on it, grab its little blue grip, and extend it through. And so I'll rename this north elevation. And then you can go through and do this for all of these. But what I really wanted to do was click on this elevation or this datum, copy it up. Say the first floor is, I don't know, 18 feet tall. Copy it up 18 feet. So now I'll rename it to level 2. And you can also do the same thing again. Let's say we're doing tall floors. Let's do 18 feet again. Level 3. And make up all your different floor levels. So then we can make floor plans for each of them. And you could place your CAD drawings on each of those floors. So break your CAD file up by floor. And so it's just each CAD file in its own file. And you can link them in on their own levels. And that way you could start tracing everything. I'll do one more. All right, so I've made these 4 floors. They're not showing up in your floor plans. So the way we can do that is we'll do View, Plan Views. I want some new floor plans, and I want them to be all these levels. Hit OK. And now we have new levels. So just like before, you'll have to crop them down to show just what you want to see. But we just do this once, and then if you need another version of this floor plan, you copy it. But we have to run through this little process of cropping once, and then do the same thing. You can type VG and hide your imported categories for the site. Oh, yeah, for the site. And it's just showing your mass. And for the second floor plan, we probably don't even need any building context. We can crop this down really close. So we're kind of cartooning up the set of your project. And these views will just become more and more developed as you develop more. So there, running back to the ground floor plan, I'm going to do VG here and also hide that site. And then type HL for hidden line, so it's black and white, kind of what I'm used to seeing. You then have the option to start building walls. And we'll see if you get to this in class. But to build walls, you have two options. We can draw it in plan, or we can use the shape we brought in. I'll show you how to draw them in plan first. So we're going to do architecture, type on wall, and right now we're starting off generic. If you have an idea of what you want it to be, you can make one of these selections and we can always duplicate it and edit it. This might not be bad to start off generic to begin with. So I'm going to start off generic 12 inches, and let's say that's all my exterior walls. So I can then draw the wall, or I can do pick line again. But one thing we want to check on before we do any of that is where is the wall location line? Are we drawing the center line of the wall? Or are we drawing the finished face of the exterior or the finished face of the interior? In this case, we'll do finished face as the exterior. And it's asking how tall this is. So right now it's unconnected. We can change that later. I'm going to leave it unconnected, and I'm going to trace the outer portion of the building. If you find that though it's drawing the wall on the wrong side of the line, push the space bar and it'll flip. And then I just march around. And for this last curving part, I can even switch how I want to draw it and use my pick line command and select those lines. And see how it drew the wall on the wrong side of the line? Even after it's been drawn, I can click on it and say flip by using this little control that shows up, or even pushing spacebar even after the wall's been drawn. These two kind of didn't combine together very well. I could type TR or use the trim command again and trim them. So to look at it in 3D, this is what we did. Since these walls were set to go up only 20 feet as their top constraint, that's as tall as they went. So what I might want to do now is come in to my elevations again, and I probably want to make levels for my different roofs. So I'm going to select this, bring it up. I'm going to say low roof. Obviously, our buildings are probably not going to be 166 feet tall, but this is just as an example. And high roof. I'm not going to do one for this. We'll offset this one. I'll show you how to do that. So with that, now I could select, so let's say these walls just want to go as high as the low roof. So I select all three of them, I'm holding down the control key while I'm clicking on them. And I'm going to say, instead of the top constraint being unconnected, I'm going to say go to the low roof. And they go up. I will do the same thing with these other walls. And I can actually try and use my little tab command, get everything. And then if I hold shift down, I can unselect these walls that I don't want to change. And for these ones, I could say I want all of you go to the high roof. And they go up. Let's say I wanted these walls to go higher. I can always use the align command, select the top surface, select the top surface of that, and make these walls come up as high as that shape. And if I click on that wall now, its top constraint is still the same. It's still the high roof, but it has an offset for what that difference was. So it's an additional 18 feet, 6 and 55 64ths. So that's one way to do it. And that gives you a lot of ability to take these walls and start editing more. We'll want to draw another wall in up high here. But for now, this works well for getting started making walls. The other way you can draw walls is if I didn't have any walls on this shape, I could say I want to do wall, but I want to click down now to say wall by face. And then we come over here and select the faces and join them. And it'll select the faces of that shape. It's not as clean because you could see it filled in here, and I don't think I necessarily wanted to do that with my design. So it's not quite as clean, but if you make complex shapes with masses, this is a good way to turn them into Revit walls. And that's about it for today's class. This is if we get this far, we're doing pretty well. And then what we'll start to do is we'll look at how we can add in families, doors, roofs, floors, and really build this into a building that we can then just start manipulating in Revit. And everything starts to get easier after that. We're doing much less of the big moves, and we can work together to figure out exactly how to build your design in Revit.